Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Book Review Blog. Today we're going to review the book Just After Sunset by Stephen King. This is a collection of short stories that Stephen King has written. There are 13 of them, and so I will kind of split it in half since 13 isn't an even number. Hopefully this time I'll do 7 and then do the remaining 6 in another video. So let's get started. The first story in the book is called Willa. The main characters in the book are Willa, she's a girl, and her fiance David, and they are on a train that bound for San Francisco. I'm not exactly sure where they got on the train originally. I think it was Boston or somewhere out east. I don't think it was ever really mentioned, but they do their train does get derailed in a western town, although not in San Francisco. So they are waiting for another train to pick them up and take them the rest of the way to San Francisco. And they're there with a group of other train passengers, and somehow Willa leaves, and David doesn't know where she is, and he starts to look for her. And eventually he does find her, and he starts to talk with her and say, hey, we got to get back to the train because the train is picking us up. And every time he says this, she says, you don't know what's in front of your eyes, or you never see what's just in front of you. And that really opens up David's mind and telling what exactly happened after this train derailment and the effects of this train derailment. So I liked the book, or the short story. It was all right. It wasn't like my favorite in the book, but still it was okay. The next book is called The Gingerbread Girl, and this is a story about a girl named Emily. If I could give her an age, I'd say like late 20s, maybe early 30s. She is married, and she did have a daughter, but unfortunately her daughter, who's named Amy, died in, I don't know if it was like crib death or what. It was just kind of a sudden death. So to combat the sadness of her daughter's passing, Emily starts to run. And it's kind of a hobby, or thought to be a hobby, but now it starts to become an obsession where she's running, of course, every day and very long distances, and where she's kind of thinking of anything but running. And this puts a damper on her marriage, where her husband doesn't think that she's really addressing the idea of her daughter's passing or the grief that should be focused, but she's really running. And this does cause a rift in their marriage, and Emily decides that she needs a new location. So she moves from, again, I'm assuming the Northeast or somewhere like that, to a place called Vermilion Key, which is off the coast of Florida. I think it's off the coast of Sarasota. So very similar to the book Duma Key that I had just read and reviewed. And again, she starts to run. And she's there for quite a while, and where she gets to know the people that are there. And this is I want to say like off season for this, because you think that these are houses that people like snowbirds come, people called snowbirds, where they go down to Florida for the winter and stay in these houses and then go back up north for the summer, spring, and fall. But anyway, there is a new man who moves on to the island who Emily has never seen. His name is Mr. Pickering, and she is running down his street, and Emily starts to notice something that's hanging out of Mr. Pickering's driveway, or out of his trunk of his car. And it looks like a woman, and she takes a closer look and realizes that it is a woman who has been killed. And so she figures that this Mr. Pickering has killed her. And that's when Mr. Pickering arrives and knocks her out because she knows too much and wants to kill her. And so Emily does get away, and again starts to run. And I'm imagining that the reason why it's called the Gingerbread Girl is a kind of form of the gingerbread man, where kind of run as fast as you can't catch me, I'm the gingerbread man type thing. So anyway, that's what my interpretation of it was. But anyway, that was good as well. It was a little longer, so it kind of took a while to read. But anyway, still a good story. The next story is called Harvey's Dream. And this one was not a long, short story. It was quite short. It focused on an older couple. Their names are Harvey and Janet. And it's kind of even though it's third person, it's kind of in Janet's perspective. They are an older couple because they have, I think, 3 older daughters that have moved out. And Harvey wakes up from a dream. And he, wakes up and tells Janet, man, I've had like a really weird dream. And so he proceeds to tell Janet about the dream. And it involves one of their neighbors who was driving drunk in his car and had banged their car, or his car, and Janet happened to look out the window and see their neighbor's car, whom Harvey is talking about, and noticed that there was a dent there that hadn't been there before. And Harvey, goes on with this dream and says, "Oh, and we got a call from one of our daughters, and all they were saying was they have to come, and Harvey and Janet need to talk to the police." And so Janet starts to panic because she's realizing, or she's thinking, that the things that Harvey has dreamed about are starting to come true. And the last thing that they hear, or that happens in the story, is that the phone starts to ring. So, the audience is kind of left wondering, is this going to be that call that Harvey was talking about that had happened in his dream? I assume it was, but, there's really no reasoning not to think that. But again, if you want to think of a different one or a different reason, you can do that. So, I liked that. Again, it was on the shorter side, which was nice. But anyway, the next story is called Rest Stop. And it's about an author who, kind of like Stephen King, had worked under a pseudonym of Richard Bachman. This author, his actual name was John Dykstra, but he had worked under a new name of, the last name was Hardin. And he is driving from Jacksonville to Sarasota, Florida, and he has to use the bathroom. So he stops in a rest stop. And when he's at the rest stop, he's, in the front of the men's room, and he hears a very bad conversation going on in the women's restroom. And it's apparently a domestic violence issue, where he hears a husband and wife, or boyfriend, girlfriend, and the husband, or whatever, the man starts like kicking and beating the woman, because he can hear that, and he can hear the woman react. And not only is he injuring the woman, but her unborn child, because she mentioned the baby. And John is left with the question of, should he just go into the men's room and do his business and leave, or should he try to help the woman and try to help, her situation, and try to help her out. So I won't spoil that ending, because again, I want you to read this story and this book. So I thought it was good, kind of a different situation, or different story altogether. So because we've all been at the rest stops, and you never know who else has come and stopped there, because it's on the interstate, so it could be anybody, and perhaps even somebody that commits domestic violence. I certainly hope not, but regardless. The next story is called Stationary Bike. It's about a man named Richard Skivitz, and he's middle-aged, like probably late 30s, and he went to the doctor's office and for a routine checkup, and the doctor announced that his cholesterol was low, And so Richard decides to do his cholesterol was high. I'm sorry, that's where the danger is. If your cholesterol's low, that's all good. Anyway, his cholesterol was high, and Richard decides to do something about it, and he decides to buy a stationary bike. And so Richard buys this bike, and unlike, 90 or 80 or 90% of Americans or anybody that decides to do a diet and workout plan, and they start it, head on, and then it kind of fizzles, he actually remains on it, and really, kind of like Emily in the Gingerbread Girl, kind of becomes an obsession with him of doing this stationary bike because he thinks it's fun. Richard is a freelance artist, and to kind of brighten the area where his stationary bike is, he adds like a road where it's like he's driving or riding down a kind of dirt packed road, or a country road. And so along with, as he keeps riding, days go by and weeks go by, he adds to the road. And one of the things that he adds is a construction crew. And on the construction hats, he writes lipids, which kind of going along with the main reason originally of why he was doing this, because of his diet. So anyway, but as he keeps going and gets more and more involved in this bike issue, he's realizing that in his mind, and possibly on this, on the board where this road is, that things are starting to change in the road. There's bends, and there's, other nature things in the road that he obviously didn't put there, but they're showing up somehow. So he's thinking that the road is becoming real for him. And so, again, I don't want to spoil it. I liked it. I had read it before reading this book, but on its own. But I enjoyed it then, and I enjoy it now. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop there for today and just kind of pick it up again. And so I'm going to pick it up later with part 2 of this, and see if I can finish it all in part 2, or maybe even do part 3. We'll see how that goes, and I bid you all farewell and happy reading.